Buildings are important to all cultures because they serve as an avenue to understand the past and present of a society. Different societal circumstances have impacts on why buildings are the way they are. These circumstances include various regulations, renovations, historic house museums, and natural disasters. For regulations, the key player was the International Federation for Housing and Town Planning, IFHTP for short. They were especially prevalent around the two world wars. They had to focus on the needs of modern times as well as adapting historic centers into multiple-floor apartment buildings. This was necessary to keep up with the ever-changing culture in times of war. In the 50s, families began to expand across Europe, demanding more living space than was previously needed. The buildings of this time period accurately reflect the needs of society. Traditions are also preserved within buildings. Additions aren't always implemented because protests from locals prevent it. Locals like to preserve lifestyles and original foundations. This happened recently to an addition to the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy, which was prevented because of local protests. In the case of the needs of society, people still disregard the essentials of modern life. People are stubborn in their nature, and buildings reflect this when they refuse to change. Historic house museums are another way to reflect a particular culture. It preserves the original culture of the house while simultaneously altering its original function. The International Council of Museums is in charge of declaring houses as historic museums. These houses put visitors into direct contact with the history. This is the globalization of society. The museums attract tourists, yet there is also less residents and houses available to visitors because of the conversions to museums. Natural disasters also have a big impact on society and the buildings within it. Italian houses are particularly susceptible to damage, both seismic damage and flood damage. Builders must adapt to the environment. Floods and earthquakes are just a part of Italian life, and there is nothing to prevent this from happening. If the environment doesn't adapt to you, you must adapt to it. In 1974, the first seismic mitigation was officially implemented. It focuses on buildings within fault line regions. However, it is applied only after a disaster and not as prevention. This reflects the nature of Italian culture, proving that people will only change if they are physically forced to change, holding to their traditions as long as possible. All buildings give people varying degrees of perspective when examining a specific culture. They not only allow people to understand the particular present society, but they also serve as a window into the past. Buildings, even though they are essentially inanimate, are forced to adapt as the culture around it transitions. The life around buildings simply does not allow them to remain static and permanent throughout time. Wars, natural disasters, social shifts, globalization, and other factors all contribute in shaping a culture, which is then reflected in how that culture continuously reshapes and transforms the buildings within its society.